actually made the decision to sell my practice about 8 years ago. People around me thought this was the craziest business decision ever. Like, who actually buys a building, expands her practice, hires a bunch of people, and then decides she doesn't want anything to do with any of that? We are living in a society that prioritizes the next for conventional success. But what can be missing in all that is meaning. Meaning without purpose, meaning without fulfillment. If you've reached one level of success already and you are itching to maybe do something more meaningful, more fulfilling, what could that look like for you? Who are you becoming in this season and stage of life? Well, in this conversation today, I will be sharing 5 signs that maybe it's actually time for you to make the switch into something that you have been called to do more of. Hello, Brave Table fam. Welcome to another episode of The Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta, and this is your destination, your oasis to be all things just a little bit more brave. Brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And if you are new, welcome. I am so glad to welcome you here, and you are in for a very, very special treat. But first, I wanted to just kind of pull one of my affirmation cards. This is from my That Sucked Now What affirmation card deck. If you haven't gotten them, you can go ahead and grab them and the conversation card deck that has been super popular at thatsuckednowwhat.com. That is thatsuckednowwhat.com. And let's head into our little affirmation and intention for our conversation today. I know it is important to work, yet I do not revolve my life around it. I'm allowed to play and have fun. And I kid you not, literally, sometimes these cards speak to me. It's crazy because I literally just picked it before I press record. And this is interesting because I have a question for you. Do you play at work? And what I mean by this is, do the most joyful parts of you come alive when you are in your work or your career? Or are you looking to make a switch? Are you getting the itch to maybe shift and change your career? Maybe to shift and change your passion? Maybe shift and change and start that project? Well, in this conversation today, I will be sharing 5 signs that maybe it's actually time for you to make the switch into something that you have been called to do more of. And what does that exploration look like? Well, if we take this affirmation, now, are you one to be sitting at your day job and take it as just work? Maybe somebody told you you were really good at it. Maybe somebody told you that, or this has been a skill that you've been doing for quite a few years. Or maybe this work, job, career, this has been something that you've wanted your whole life. And now you're there. And now you're like, oh, okay, what's next? Is this all that there ever was? Is there more? And that's part of our evolution. It's part of our growth. And I want to go back to the time when I was a cosmetic dentist. Now, when people ask me, did your parents force you to do that? No, because honestly, they had passed well before I went into the career of dentistry. But, I think that, and this is my personal experience, and if we're going to brave these conversations about why we choose certain careers, why we choose certain paths, I know for the longest time I have been a seeker. I've always, and I've just embraced it more now. I mean, I'm in my fourth decade of life, and I feel as though being unapologetic in your values, in what you stand for, in your pursuits, in your passions, and really just going after those things that make you come alive. Now, for me, it took a, pretty much rock bottom event of a breakup to help me kind of unravel certain strings in my life and why I made those decisions. And if I look back at my very first career, being a cosmetic dentist, going through all of the years of schooling, people still ask me to this day, do you regret it? Do you regret all of the years of schooling? Do you regret your student debt? All of these things. No, I wouldn't change it for the world. And if you are listening to this today, driving in your car, maybe you're driving to your office, you're driving to work, it's not exciting you, you're feeling dragged on this show is giving you life right now. I want you to hold on a minute. Hold on, because maybe there was that time where you were excited about it. Maybe there was that time where you were so curious about it. Maybe there was that time where you were just in love with the sake of being in love, of learning this new skill. And maybe you are now you're at that mark. They don't call it a 7-year itch for nothing. I just recorded a podcast where and this will be coming out soon, so this will be kind of a little spoiler alert, where I interview my husband for the first time in probably 2 years. So stay tuned for that, Brave Table fam. But we talk about the 7-year itch and the cycle in relationships. And, this 7-year itch, and I'm into astrology, there is this cycle of this birth and death. And if you are into Vedic astrology, if you've ever had a Vedic astrology reading, they will talk to you about this 7-year cycle. And there's a birth and death cycle every 7 years, which is why there is something that's called a Saturn return that tends to happen in between the ages of, 28 to 32, where you will have a big awakening, where you will have, for the first time, some sort of failure, some sort of setback, something where you will see that you are no longer in alignment with the path that you were taking. And it's why breakups and, you know, relationships and failures and missed promotions and job loss and career switches tend to happen around the stage, because you're starting to find your true north. You're starting to really align with what's truest to your soul's calling. And some of you are probably listening to this thinking like, okay, yes, Neeta, but now I'm in my 40s or I'm in my late 30s, or maybe that didn't happen to me. Well, maybe it's happening to you now. And I'm using, the 7-year cycle as an example. And I'll go back into, my journey as a cosmetic dentist. I knew when I fell in love with dentistry itself. I was working for, and this is true story. I was working in Chicago, north side of Chicago, for this dentist. His name was Dr. Horrible. I'm not making it up. That's his real name. Shout out to him wherever he is. And that was one of my very first jobs. It was on a Saturday. I remember it was literally like 2 blocks from my home on Sheridan Road. And that practice is still there today, believe it or not. His daughter has taken it over. And I remember being a 15-year-old kid, and this guy took a chance on me. My mom was sick, dying with breast cancer, and I needed to help my parents, my family, get some cash. And so this guy took a bet on me. He took a chance, and I made tons and tons and tons and tons of mistakes. Looking back, I'm like, how did he ever not fire me? But I'm so grateful to him, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know some of the beginnings of how I recognized that I could make people feel seen, heard, and understood. And I didn't know what that was back then. But as a 15-year-old, and answering phones on a Saturday and assisting patients, helping them to their chair. And, I lived in a neighborhood where majority of people were, elderly, and they were elderly patients coming in. Who really wanted to get a root canal on a Saturday morning? Not really. And I wanted to really bury all of the responsibilities and things that I was dealt with as a young girl who just wanted to go to the mall. That was the thing back then, on Saturdays with her friends, and couldn't do it. And this was my place away from the chaos. This was my, my safety, my place of my little haven that I could actually have and chat it up with some of these patients who are super nervous before their appointments, make them smile, crack a few jokes, and literally talk about their weekends and give them a listening ear. And that felt so good. And that would be the building blocks of me then choosing this art form of dentistry, that I could actually change people's smiles. But really, it was more of that connection piece. And so that thread of connection began in the little operatory room of Dr. Horrible's office. And it's interesting because when I was one of the, I think it was like 75 students that got into UIC dental school. It was super competitive. It was the only dental school in the state of Illinois that was, open and in public school setting, and that's a whole different conversation. But it was high competition, and so I remember when I actually got the acceptance letter, I'm like, yes, I'm in these 4 years. This is going to be great. And in true fashion, that was my dharma for that stage of my life. And I didn't know any better because, I said yes to this thing and I really thought I loved it. And I was so good at it because I was so good at connecting with people because I learned all of those skills. And the art form that I took, yes, it was working in people's mouths. Some people today might be, disgusted, like, how could you even do that? And yeah, there was a time where I was over all of that. Yet that piece, that thread of making people feel seen, heard, and understood, really listening to the things that they weren't even sharing, because it was kind of like barbershop talk. If you've ever watched the movie Barbershop, or if you've ever lived, like I lived in Chicago, uh, it's a thing. You go to the barbershop and they know it's like a therapy session. People would come to me and literally, and you're like, well, you were working in their mouths. How could they tell you everything? Well, we'd have to take x-rays, we take impressions, it's a whole thing. You're in an intimate setting, literally, and they just feel like they can share their most intimate secrets. And of course, I tried to make things jovial and fun and light because, I'm working in somebody's mouth and they probably don't even want to be there to begin with. And so I was really good at it. And it's not, nobody was pressuring me. This was the thing that I thought was going to be the thing for the rest of my life. But again, I didn't know any better. And so, when I graduated, I worked in, quite a few different places. And, I worked for, state places where you would be seeing 30 to 50 patients a day, literally. I had, and it was literally like buzzing around different operatories. That was nuts. Had like 2 to 3 assistants. And that's what you would do when you were working for a state environment. And then I worked for places where, it was more of a cosmetic environment, where I wasn't breaking my back, where I didn't really have like the early stages of like arthritis because I was holding a handpiece for too long, or my neck was jacked up, or my lower back was jacked up because I was like upside down and in these like weird contractive ways. And it really took a physical toll on my body. And then entering this new era of using dentistry as a full art form to be able to see the symmetry in somebody's smile. And I've always been obsessed with smile my whole life. And that was another evolution. And then from there, taking other courses that would help me bridge that gap and help me understand more of the cosmetic side of things. Then taking that leap, buying my first practice. And, doing all of the things that I could never do when I was working under somebody else. Taking the leap as an entrepreneur, taking the leap as a female business owner in a space that was mostly dominated by men and older white men, especially in the area that I worked at. So there were a lot of things that, again, as we evolve out of the old essence of who we once were, we are now shifting and changing. And that's a good thing, to be brave to shift and change, to be brave to ask yourself, hey, is this still lighting me up? What else am I curious about? And then after my big breakup and my big divorce, and when I was really having to face a lot of previous trauma, previous healing that I had locked up in a closet for nearly a decade, that begged the question of, what am I actually doing with my life? Is this it? Is making 7 figures or over 7 figures, having a big dental office, having all these people work under me, is this it? I literally asked myself that, because I was like, okay, been there, done that. It was like it was a checkbox on this checkbox of like fulfillment and these accolades and achievements. And I've been used to that. That was how I grew up. Piano lessons, piano competitions, dance competitions, ballet competitions, to have that medal. And so when I finally got that medal at the end of my 20s, ooh, 7-figure practice. Woohoo. Was there more to that? And that's when I started to ask different questions, because that's when I started to travel more. And that's when I started to go to more retreats. And that's when I started to see the world more outside of my tiny little box of dentistry, or that to healthcare, that to medicine, and started spending time with people who were startup entrepreneurs, completely different. And I started to talk about and spend more time with people who were talking big visions and disrupting industries, which I had no idea about the startup world. I just had capital. And as a young person who had capital because she sold her practice, that's when doors started opening, doors that I couldn't believe started opening. And I share all of this with you not to brag, not to rub it in your face. It's to really pay close attention to where you are at in your journey right now. And some of the signs that were really signs, and they were really kind of these stopping points for me to really understand and look into, was this a step on that journey? And the first sign that I want to share with you, kind of if you are having this itch for any sort of career transition, is the first thing is you're constantly curious about learning new things. Maybe you sign up for a yoga teacher training. Maybe you sign up for a Reiki workshop. Maybe you sign up for that breath work thing. Maybe you're looking at more so spending time doing that new project, the crocheting, the macrame, whatever it is for you. You're curious about it. You're filling your time with other things that light you up. And maybe it's exposing you to a new community. Maybe you have a sister circle. Maybe you are saying yes to that BNI meeting. Maybe you are saying yes to that community meeting at your kids' school. Whatever that is, you are curious about learning new things, and you are saying yes to those things. So that's number one. Number two, you are spending more time doing more of those things than your current work. than your actual work. Maybe you've called off sick 1 or 2 or 3 times because you were focused on doing more of the other things and projects than your actual work. Number 3, your work becomes that job. And it's something that you may be good at, but it no longer excites you. And this is what's interesting, friends, because I remember this was maybe, I want to say 6 months or maybe less than a year that I actually made the decision to sell my practice about 8 years ago now. And well, it's coming up as 8 years, but it's still in that 7-year mark. And so, and last year again, I had the 7-year itch. I had this itch that, wow, something else is birthing out of me. There's something else that I'm curious about. I don't know what that is yet. And I want to explore that. But let's go back another 7 years, though, because in 2015, when I decided to sell my practice, and this was actually in 2014 that I started thinking about it. And even before thinking about it, I decided that I wanted to expand. So you might do crazy things like this. I wanted to expand my practice, and I actually ended up buying the whole building. And which was crazy, and I mean that was a very audacious thing to do, but I did. And with all of that investment, the business was even more busy. So I hired more doctors. And I remember going to, it was I had a trip to Burning Man later that summer. And then shortly after that, I had my first full 3-day plant medicine retreat. And it was during that plant medicine retreat with some very, very special humans that I had decided that this was not it. And when I came back, I spoke to my financial advisor. I spoke to all of my kind of advisors about how quickly can I sell my practice and actually move from Chicago. And Chicago was where I was living, for those of you who are just tuning in and new to me. And so people around me thought I had joined a cult. People around me thought this was the craziest business decision ever. Like, who actually buys a building, expands her practice, hires a bunch of people, and then decides, oh, she doesn't want anything to do with any of that. So keep in mind, you're listening to this and you might think, well, actually, that's where I am right now. I'm kicking myself in the foot because I just did that. I'm kicking myself in the foot because I thought I wanted that. I thought that was the next inevitable rung in that ladder of conventional success. I thought that was the next thing that I am supposed to do as somebody who already reached a certain echelon, that of course I'm supposed to go into the managerial role. Of course I'm supposed to buy the building. Of course I'm supposed to expand, because that's what people who were ahead of me in that particular industry have done as well. But was it something that was soul aligned to me? I wasn't asking those brave questions. I wasn't willing to have that brave conversation until I was around like-minded people who actually asked, who are you becoming in this season and stage of life? And that was such a powerful question. It's so powerful that I ask guests this when I interview them today. Who are you becoming? And the bigger question was, in 3 years, where do you see yourself? And when I was asked that question in ceremony, I was like, it's definitely not in Chicago. And if it definitely was not in Chicago, what were all of the brick and mortar things that I had that I needed to cut ties to? And now I'm not saying that anybody needs to put in their 2 weeks tomorrow, or burn down your bridges or burn down anything that you have built. That is exactly not what I'm saying. I'm asking you to have a brave conversation with, is that really your conventional path? If you've reached one level of success already and you are itching to maybe do something more meaningful, more fulfilling, what could that look like for you? And the next sign that I want to point you out to is number 4, right? So we've already gone into the first sign is you're constantly curious about learning new things. The second sign is you're doing more of those things and projects than your actual work. You might actually be calling off your work. The third is your work becomes a job. It's something that you're good at. So you think that you have to kind of go after the next promotion, go after the managerial position, go after buying the whole thing, especially when we are living in a society that prioritizes the next for conventional success, right? But what can be missing in all that is meaning without purpose, meaning without fulfillment, meaning that's not aligned to your dharma, to your soul's calling, your soul's biggest evolution. And the fourth is that maybe you don't want to go to work, or you begin to dread it, and it affects your mental health. And maybe you start to do other things to numb, because you are no longer, it becomes from going from a place of excitement, it becomes a full dread. And for me, this could also be the number 4, because for me, it was, what else is out there? That particular thing was okay for you for that period of time, but you've lost that fulfillment. You've lost that meaning. What does it all mean? Why am I doing this? And majority of people now want to find something that is connected to a sense of fulfillment. And just like in my book, and That Suck Now What, when we're talking about when we've risen from something, we had a fall, we had an ignition. And if you haven't gotten my book, you can actually get it at thatsucknowwhat.com. But there is something that happened to you, for you. You had an ignition. You had to make a different decision, whether it was in a relationship, whether it was with a boss, whether it was with a manager, whether it was with a life diagnosis, a medical condition. You had to make a decision. And so you started to rise. Stage 3 is that rising stage. And you're rising because you're like, I don't really know anything about this diagnosis, but I'm going to look for all of the right mentors, the right people, and I'm going to be like a student learning constantly with a voracious appetite. And so maybe some of you are rising in a completely different industry. Maybe you are taking these online classes. Maybe you are deepening into more of your spiritual practice. Maybe you are looking at having more brave conversations in your house with your spouse, with yourself. And so you're starting to ask different questions. Am I motivated just by money? Am I motivated to help other people? Am I motivated to mentor others? And so that, for me, was looking shinier. That I could actually use my gifts to share with other people. At this time, when I was also making the decision to sell my practice, I had also started a nonprofit. I started a nonprofit. It was called Independent Awakening. And I started to mentor other young girls and other women. I started to speak on these high school stages and these community events around my nonprofit that helped women and girls step into their bold confidence to have an independent awakening, just like I did. many years ago. And so then I started to, which is stage 4, you step into this magnifying stage. And it's not that I dreaded work, it's that other things were more exciting for me. I was traveling a lot more. And on the business side, I was able to only be there 2 days a week, 1 day a week, twice a month, because I had other doctors there and I can just be the one that was, and I had operators there. And this was something that I could see from afar. And so people asked, well, why not keep it? Why not that be your passive income? Well, because at the end of the day, I was done with Chicago, and that was an energetic lift for me. And this could look completely different to you. And the last sign that I want to spend time on is maybe you are spending more time using the 80-20 rule on doing more of that thing than your day to day. Maybe all you're doing and consuming is your yoga teacher training or your stand-up comedy routine or the coding class that you've been taking or the life coaching that you've been consuming yourself with, whatever that is. You're spending more time doing that. And at this point, I was doing 80% of all of the projects that I was spending my time on, and it really excited me. And it almost then, that 20%, it started to shrink. And that's when I knew, all right, I have built this thing into this phase. I wanted to give my little baby that I grew to this certain stage, which was my dental practice. Instead of shutting it down, I wanted to sell it to somebody that could actually grow it and love on it, just like I gave the love for it for so many years. And now I understand some of you might be in businesses or jobs and roles that you're like, okay, I've kind of evolved out of. I'm ready for that change, or I'm curious. Neither I want to know more. I want to know more. How do I make that leap? How do I make that step? Well, I want to invite you to something that I am so excited to be talking about, especially as we are entering these kind of spring months, where it's with my co-founder, Sahara, and I. We have co-founded Highest Self Institute, and we are putting on a 3-part soul-inspired workshop for anybody who has ever thought about maybe a coaching career, or maybe you're like, I don't know about this, but I really want it for myself, my own personal development, my own personal enhancement. And this is a completely free workshop. We're doing 3 of them, where it's around money, mastery, and magic. And it's called a 3 soul-inspired workshop for creating an abundant career in coaching. And again, this could be a starter for anybody who's curious about their own personal growth. And we know that after 6 batches in the last 3 years, actually graduating almost 6 batches of students in the last 3 years that we've had this amazing company that we've now rebranded as Highest Self Institute. Our Dharma coaching students, many of them go on to create careers in coaching. Many of them go on as mentors and healers and teachers and trainers and speakers just because they've gone through this program. And when I was going through my little itch, at the crossroads and intersection of my juncture with all of the success that I had already amalgamated in one area, which was science and medicine and dentistry. And I knew my soul was really calling to have a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. And I did not know what that looked like. And so I, along with Sahara, Rose, we've taken everything that we wish we had so that you don't have to go through the 7 years that I know I did. in order to come together with somebody else who shares the same passion and magic and dharma for helping you step into your dharma at whatever next season and stage that is. So if you are curious at who you are becoming in this next season and stage, I would love to invite you to our free Soul Inspired workshop. It's completely free. You can sign up. I will put the link in the show notes, and it's happening a couple of different dates in March, and we would be so excited to have you there. And this is so important just for the sake of our collective growth. We're not meant to be doing the rest of our lives in just one particular career. And not that I'm throwing shade at any of my friends who have chosen, medicine, dentistry, or anything that has been a lifelong career for them. I'm not throwing any shade on that, because there are different ways that you can evolve out of that. Even if you are listening to me and you're like, I don't think I would ever leave any of those professions. And whether you're a teacher or you're in tech or you have a great managerial position, but maybe you're curious about deepening your own personal growth, your own personal advancement. We are not the same person. And even our cells go through a full shift and change every 7 years. It sheds its lining every 7 years. So we are not that same person who we were 7 years ago. Maybe 7 years ago, you would get so triggered about certain comments, certain things, but now you've evolved out of that. You've made peace with that. You've forgiven yourself. You've forgiven others. Maybe some of those things don't affect you because you have shifted. You have changed. And maybe in this season and stage of life, you are looking to have more of a juicy relationship with your own spirituality, with your own personal needs of who you're becoming. Maybe you're not just a mom, or you're not just the CEO of your household. You're not just the CEO of your team or your business. You are multidimensional. And I would love to invite you to our 3-part series talking all about how the magic of coaching, the mastery, and even the money can be an interesting endeavor for you in this season and stage of life, to put back more meaning, more soulful conversations, and to have those brave conversations with yourself. So if you're curious about it, I will link it in the show notes. And as always, if this has benefited you in some way, tell us. I would love to know. Share it from the rooftops. Tag us at The Brave Table. If you haven't followed us at all on iTunes or Spotify, give us a follow. All you have to do is hit that like button and hit the follow button. That helps us grow the audience so much. I cannot tell you. That would be the biggest honor. And I just want to thank you, because I know you can spend your time in so many ways. I'm so glad that every week I can add so much value to your life. If this has helped you, share this with a friend, share this with a colleague, share this with somebody, maybe bring them to the workshop. This means so much. And if you haven't already given us a 5-star review and this has impacted your life in some way, I want to hear it. You can also follow me at Neeta Bhushan on Instagram as well. I'd love to hear your stories. You can tag us one of your favorite moments. But when you screenshot your review at support@globalgrit.co, that is support@globalgrit.co, I will send you our free self-care calendar. Thank you so, so much for being here. And until next time, I will see you soon. Don't forget to be just a little bit more brave.
Death is no new friend for me. That gave even more fervor and even more reason for one life to exist and be around, because of going back to this untapped potential. Yeah. All of this cosmic, beautiful energy that exists in everything, and not getting the opportunity to have it expressed or even fully expressed.